Captain Beckett knew they were going to die. Her rescue vessel, the Knight, was dead in the water, its rudder gone, taking on water in a hurricane-force storm. "Mayday, mayday!" she repeated into the radio, her voice steady but hopeless. It was then that her first mate shouted, pointing into the swirling chaos. A boat, a small rust-streaked car ferry, a vessel that had no business being in these waters. But it wasn't fighting the storm. It was using it, gliding through the troughs of giant waves with a skill that defied physics. On her radar, it was a ghost. In the water, it was their only hope. Welcome to the unspoken chapter. Before we uncover the secret behind this impossible rescue, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe that true mastery comes from experience, not technology, hit that subscribe button and help us tell the stories of these silent legends. Just an hour earlier, the bridge of the Knight had been filled with a confident calm. The Knight was one of the most modern vessels in the Coast Guard's fleet. With its advanced radar, storm-piercing design, and satellite communication systems, it was, in theory, a ship that no sea could conquer. Captain Beckett had seen countless storms in her 15-year career and had complete faith in her vessel. But this storm was different. It had arrived faster and more ferociously than any weather report had predicted. 30-foot waves were crashing against the hull like hammers. And then, with a deafening crack, the steering system had failed. The ship was now nothing more than a metal shell at the mercy of the ocean. Her crew was professional. Damage control teams tried to seal the flooding compartments, while the communications officer desperately tried to contact the mainland. But Beckett knew the sea, and right now the sea was a predator, patiently tiring out its prey. It was sinking them, slowly. At the first mate's cry, everyone on the bridge turned to look. The thing that emerged from behind the curtain of gray waves and driving rain seemed like a mirage at first. It was Silas's ferry, the Sea Serpent. Beckett recognized it immediately, a slow, noisy, and rusty boat that carried cars and a few passengers between the islands. Among her crew, the boat was a running joke. The floating tin can, they called it. Its captain, Silas, was a stubborn old man in his 70s, with a face wrinkled by wind and salt, who listened more to the sea than he spoke. Beckett had warned him multiple times for not complying with Coast Guard regulations. The man still used paper charts and a compass instead of modern navigation systems. But now, that floating tin can, that stubborn old man, was doing what her multi-million-dollar ship could not. It was surviving. And not just surviving, it was dancing in the heart of the storm. The Sea Serpent wasn't fighting the waves head-on. Silas would climb a giant wave, and just at its peak, he'd slightly tilt his boat to avoid the break, then slide down its back into the next trough. It was as if he were reading the ocean's rhythm and moving in harmony with it. This was something no computer program or simulator could teach. This was the instinctual wisdom that comes from thousands of hours spent in conversation with the sea. A crackle came over the radio. It was Silas's voice, calm, clear, and cutting through the roar of the storm. "Knight, this is Sea Serpent. I'm approaching your position. Prepare your crew on deck." Beckett grabbed the radio. "Sea Serpent, turn back." "This is suicide. The waves will tear you apart. You can't get close to us." The reply from the radio was short. "The ocean always leaves a path, Captain. You just have to know where to look." The next 20 minutes were the most incredible display of seamanship Beckett had ever witnessed. Silas brought his ferry to the leeward side of the Knight, where the waves were relatively calmer, but keeping the two ships side by side was impossible. Any giant wave could smash them together and tear them apart. Silas didn't even try. He did something smarter. He positioned the Sea Serpent about 20 yards away from the Knight, like a shield against the waves. The ferry's flat, wide hull absorbed the energy of the largest waves, creating a few seconds of relative calm behind it. He was using these small windows. "First group now," Silas shouted, his voice audible even over the storm. Beckett didn't hesitate. "Abandon ship order! Abandon ship! Move!" she commanded. The crew inflated and lowered a life raft, but the raft was tossed about in the giant waves like a cork. Silas moved his ferry slightly forward, using his engine to create a current that dragged the raft towards the side of his ferry. It was an incredible maneuver that required calculations down to the centimeter. Her crew climbed, one by one, from the raft to the ropes Silas had thrown, and onto the deck of the ferry. Beckett, honoring the tradition of a captain being the last to leave their ship, made sure everyone was off. Her eyes were on the bridge of her sinking vessel. All that technology, all those millions of dollars brought to its knees by the sea. She closed her eyes and jumped into the last life raft. When she was pulled onto the deck of the Sea Serpent, she was soaked and shivering. Silas was at the helm. His face was expressionless, his eyes never leaving the horizon for a second, as if he wasn't the man who had just rescued a crew of 12 from an impossible situation. "Is everyone on deck, Captain?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the sea. "Yes," Beckett said. We owe you." Silas just nodded. "The ocean gave today," he said. "It can take tomorrow. Now I have to get you to shore." They watched from the deck of the rusty ferry as the night sank into the water. It was the silent farewell of a modern giant, and the ones who saved them were a relic forgotten by the sea and its old captain. When they reached shore, a crisis center had been set up. Coast Guard officials met Beckett and her crew. There was relief that everyone was alive, but there was also a sense of shame. They had lost one of their best ships. As Beckett gave her official report, she struggled to find the words. How could she explain what happened? To say, "We were rescued by a civilian ferry," was a gross understatement that bordered on fiction. The captain's maneuvers, they were extraordinary, she stated to the panel of grim-faced senior officers, "unlike anything I've ever seen." It was as if he was speaking the language of the waves with his boat. The debriefing was brutal. The loss of a state-of-the-art vessel like the Knight was a major incident, and the panel of inquiry was looking for answers, if not a scapegoat. They listened to Beckett's account with thinly veiled skepticism. One vice admiral, a man known for his adherence to protocol, leaned forward. "Captain Beckett, are you suggesting that an uncertified 70-year-old man in a vessel that barely meets minimum safety standards succeeded where your entire crew and a $45 million ship failed?" "I am not suggesting it, sir." "I am stating it as fact," Beckett replied, her voice firm. "He did not fight the storm. He used it." To verify her incredible claims, the panel brought in a civilian meteorologist and a naval engineer. They analyzed the black box data from the Knight and the satellite weather imagery. The engineer was blunt. "According to every simulation, a rescue operation of that nature with a vessel of the Sea Serpent's class in a Force 10 gale is a statistical impossibility. The ferry should have been swamped and broken apart within minutes." The meteorologist agreed. He wasn't just navigating a storm, he was navigating a series of rogue waves that were off the charts. It shouldn't have been possible. The panel's skepticism hardened into suspicion. Beckett's career was hanging by a thread. Days later, with the official inquiry stalled on a note of incredulity, Beckett knew she had to find the truth herself. She started with official channels. She pulled the mariner records for one Silas Kane. The file was almost insultingly sparse. A basic ferry operator's license, renewed without fanfare every 5 years. No advanced certifications, no naval history, nothing to explain the godlike seamanship she had witnessed. It was a dead end, a blank wall designed to stop people from looking further. Frustrated, she decided to go outside the chain of command. She called Admiral Hayes, a retired Navy legend she had served under years ago, a man who now spent his days fishing. She explained the situation in detail, the storm, the impossible rescue, and the quiet old man who moved like the sea itself. The admiral was silent for a long time on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. "Beckett, some ghosts are better left to the depths. I suggest you drop this." "I can't, Admiral," she insisted, her voice pleading. "They think I'm losing my mind. They think I'm covering up a mistake. My career is on the line, but more than that, I have to know. It was real." The Admiral let out a long sigh, a sound that seemed to travel across years of secrets. "Because it was real," he finally said. "You didn't see a ferryman, Beckett. You saw a legend, a man we in the Navy thought was long dead. His name isn't really Silas. He was a master chief in the SWCC, the best small boat handler we ever had. The man who drove the SEAL teams into the mouth of hell and brought them back out. His call sign was Serpent. He could make a boat do things that defied physics, become one with the water. He vanished 30 years ago after a classified mission in the South China Sea went bad. We lost a lot of good men. He brought back the only survivors but disappeared afterward. Said he was done with the noise and wanted a quiet life. We buried his file and let the ghost go." Beckett's breath caught in her throat. The sea serpent. It all made a horrifying, beautiful sense. That stubborn old man wasn't just a civilian. He was the ghost of one of the nation's most elite warriors. A week later, Captain Beckett, with a bottle of good Irish whiskey in her hand, made the long drive to the remote fishing village Silas called home. She found his small, weathered cabin at the end of a wooden pier. It was a place of profound quiet, the only sounds being the cry of gulls and the gentle lapping of water against the pilings. Before approaching, she watched him from a distance. He was mending his nets, his hands moving with the same economical, precise grace he had used at the helm of his boat. He wasn't just tying knots. He was communing with the tools of his trade, a master in his chosen sanctuary. She walked down the pier, her footsteps loud in the silence. He didn't look up until she was standing right beside him. She placed the bottle on the crate next to him. The debriefing panel said what you did was impossible. "Statistically," she said softly. Silas continued his work. "The ocean doesn't care about statistics," he rumbled, his voice like stones rolling in the surf. "They said the sea serpent shouldn't have survived, let alone rescued a dozen people," she continued. He finally paused, looking at her for the first time. "The boat's got good bones. Knows the water." Beckett took a breath, the salty air filling her lungs. "Admiral Hayes says hello," she said. "He said the serpent always did know the water." At the mention of his call sign, Silas froze. His hands, which had been so fluid and certain just a moment before, went completely still. The humble fisherman facade dissolved, and for a fleeting second, Beckett saw him, the Master Chief, the legend, a man burdened by a past too heavy to speak of. He looked out at the endless expanse of the sea, his jaw tight. It was a silent, painful tribute to a life he had tried to bury. He finally turned his gaze from the ocean and looked at the bottle of whiskey, then back to her. "Thank you for the lesson, Master Chief," Beckett said in a low voice. Silas didn't answer with words. He simply reached out a weathered hand, took the bottle, and with a practiced twist, broke the seal. It was more than a confession. It was an acceptance, a silent agreement between two children of the same sea. He had chosen to live an unspoken chapter. And sometimes the greatest heroism is to simply continue mending your nets after the storm has passed. Silas's story shows that even the most modern technology can kneel before the experience of a master filled with the wisdom of the sea. Do you know such masters who trust in old ways but are wiser than anyone? Share their stories with us in the comments. If this story also pulled you into the depths of the sea, subscribe to The Unspoken Chapter and help these silent legends defy the storms. See you in the next episode. And remember, sometimes the rustiest looking ships are steered by the most experienced captains.